Our scripture lesson today is from Genesis, chapter 28, verses 10 through 22. You can find this on page 25 in the Old Testament section of your pew Bibles. Listen for the word of God. Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones from the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid, and he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. And this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God be with me and will keep me in this place that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And all that you give me, I surely will give 1/10 to you. The word of the Lord.
Okay, it's Stewardship Sunday. Leave it to Debbie McKinley to invite someone in to talk about tithing. Actually, that's not what I want to talk about. I know that's where the story ends, and I know that's what every stewardship committee just loves to hear, that 10% of all that you give me, God, I'll give to you. But today I want to get underneath the story a little bit. You know, what leads him to this? What leads Jacob to this response? You know, Israel loved the story of Jacob. He was the heel grabber. If you recall the story, he connived the rights of being the firstborn child from his twin brother Esau. He acquired them for a bowl of lentil chili. And years later, with his mother Rebekah's help, Jacob then swindled Esau out of the family blessing. Bill Moyers calls them the mother-son team of con artists. They take advantage of the blind man and the dim-witted older brother. Isaac then blesses Jacob. Esau discovers and lets out a howl. Mother Rebekah intervenes and says then to Father Isaac, You know, I'm getting tired of those Hittite women around here. You know, Esau married a couple of them, and they never give me a minute's peace. I don't want Jacob to marry someone like that. Let's send him off to meet a really nice girl. And it's on his way that he has this moment. Head on the rock, discovering it's not just a rock. Have you ever had such a moment? A spiritual moment. One of my first such experiences came when I was 17 years old. I was listening to music, of all things. It was the day after Thanksgiving. I had had it with my parents. I had retreated to the headphones in my bedroom, and I put on this brand new record album. Remember record albums? Had these huge Koss headphones on, and I was caught up in the music of a string orchestra with pianist Keith Jarrett, bassist Charlie Hayden, and saxophonist Jan Garbarek. They were playing this amazing, shimmering music, and as I listened, I felt like lifted off the bed. I don't know if it was the dopamine in the turkey. I don't know if I was just weary of my family. I don't know what it was, but for the moment, I was caught up in this experience. It felt like a trance. It felt like I was lifted into the air. There was peace and tranquility entering my soul, even though I had just had an argument with my mother. And when the music concluded, I was a different person. Have you had a moment like that? A moment where you feel like you're in the presence of God, or at least the presence of angels. It's my observation from 29 years as a pastor that these moments occur to an awful lot of people. They don't always happen in committee meetings, but they might. And the moments are not restricted to Bible characters from a time long ago. No, they come and they go. They catch us unaware. At least that's what happened to me in the bedroom with the blue striped wallpaper in a housing development in a small town. So we hear Jacob wake from the dream and say, "Surely God is in this place," and I did not know it. According to the stories of Genesis, this is his actual first encounter with God. He'd heard about God, of course, but this is the first time recorded. His mother heard God directly speak to her in a prophecy about her twin sons and how they would jostle with one another all their lives. His father had been directed by God to move around, first to some well-watered Philistine land and then to Beersheba. God spoke to Isaac in each place. But now God finds the next generation, Jacob, and speaks the same family promises, personalized for him and a new generation. And Jacob marks the spot and called it Bethel, house of God. He sets it up as a shrine, marks it as a special place, so he can go back there. Now, I never did name the bedroom with the blue striped wallpaper, but I did return to it every night. And the spiritual experience didn't come back. In fact, that record album, I played it over and over again, trying to repeat that moment that I had. I even played it when I was working on this sermon, but alas, the moment didn't come back. And I've had other moments too. There was a time I was with the Boy Scout troop. We're hiking in the Adirondacks, lower Wolfjaw Mountain. I came around the bend, and I think I saw an angel. Or the farmhouse in the Appalachian Hills up in the northwest of here, where I think I heard God say, "Be a minister." Or the Red Rock Canyon in New Mexico, where in a week of chanting psalms, I was lifted out of distress. And I realized that coyote I heard every night was not out there, it was in my soul. Or that stone chapel on the island of Iona near the North Sea, surrounded by noisy sheep praising God. These are the moments I remember. As you turn over the stones in your memory, you probably have had some moments too. As God said to the prophet Isaiah, "The earth is my footstool." And I take that to mean that sometimes God touches down. This was Jacob's experience. It was an extraordinary moment. Not every moment gets written down in the Bible. Did you notice that? Just kind of the highlights. There's no reason for him to expect this. Jacob is not a person of prayer. He's not the least bit religious. He's not about to fill out a pledge card and increase it. and his character is anything but good and upright. The Bible seems strangely indifferent about that. To all his lying and conniving, like his mother, Jacob reaches for what he believes is his, and then God finds him and declares that indeed it all is his. And God says, I'm the God of your grandfather, the God of your father. I'm the God of your children and your grandchildren who aren't even around yet. This land is their land. Every family on earth shall be blessed through your family, and you're not even married to one of those non-Hittite women yet. And I am with you. Now let me point out the obvious. This is God's word to a thief. That means it's the essence of grace. God speaks kindly to this conniving schemer, withholding all punishment, restraining all accountability. God never says to Jacob what my grandmother once said to me, you'd better shape up if you want God to love you. No, God simply gives him the promise of Abraham and honors the blessing of Isaac because Jacob is part of the family. He's part of the family. That reminds me of a confusing moment in the county where I live in Pennsylvania. Some years ago, one of our politicians got in trouble with the law. Imagine that. He was brought up on federal charges of racketeering and conspiracy, and a local Catholic priest came to his aid and announced, because of this, we're going to throw him a parade and show our support. All this was very confusing to me, growing up in a Presbyterian family, but I was still relatively new to the area. And it was explained to me on the local station, WNEP, that night. The roving reporter interviewed a parade goer who said, he may be a crook, but he's our crook. He might have well said that about Jacob. For that's how the God of Abraham, Isaac, regards Jacob, the heel grabber. He may be a crook, but he's all mine. I know where he is. I will find him. He is fully aware, this holy God, of knowing what Jacob has done without ever rubbing his nose in it. Because God is not done with Jacob yet. Oh, no, anything but. But in this moment, it's enough for God to come. God interrupts the escape from his brother. God finds him at night in a moment of vulnerability and reveals that there are angels coming down to earth to provide what the earth needs. And there are angels ascending to heaven to lift earth's aches and pains to the place where they can be healed. We call it Jacob's ladder, but actually it is a holy circulatory system where the power of God is coming and going all the time. That's what Jacob sees. Surely God is in this place, he says. God is here. It's a way of saying that God is in this life of ours, even if we don't know it. Like the woman in Oklahoma who lost her home in the tornado. Her house has no roof. The laundry is strewn across 3 counties. Her house cat is now missing. But she cries tears of joy as she describes how people from a faraway church have shown up with hot food, fresh water, clothing for her children, and probably a porta potty. I don't think God was in that terrible storm, she says, but God came to me in the gifts of those people. And she adds, I never expected it. So just exactly what kind of God are we talking about? Maybe you notice that this story really reveals a great deal, and here are just a few things to take note. God slips in the shadows just out of sight. God comes to us sometimes cloaked in our dreams, in the border of sleep and wakefulness. God sees what we do or what we don't do. God knows the future, yet allows us to live our lives here and now. God never controls us, but somehow works out the purposes of heaven through us. God stands above every family squabble, personal vendetta, or human conflict. God is kinder to us than we deserve, promising Jacob the moon and then some. God desires that we flourish, that we live and flourish. Notice how God says, your offspring will be like the dust of the earth. Or in my case, the dust under my bed. That's really generous. And one more observation, God is not bound to a single place. In the words of a favorite psalm, where can I flee your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I go down to Sheol, to hell, you're there. And to keep going, if I lie down in Bethel and put my head on a rock, if I go to Lewinsville and fall asleep during a choir anthem, which is unlikely, you were there and I didn't know it. So you see what we have here today. The storyteller of Genesis is teaching us about God. I think that's the primary purpose of the story. In grand Jewish fashion, the storyteller holds together two contradictory truths in tension. First, we don't know where God is. And second, God is here. And when we discover where God is, we can name it and mark it. But that doesn't mean that we have hung on to God's robe or chained him to the pew. We can set up the altar, burn the incense, lift up our prayers, and trust that God hears us. Yet at that moment, God's ladder may be set up over Bradley Hills, or National Press, or the National Cathedral of all places. Did you see that this week? With angels ascending and descending over there. In this way, we're reminded we never manipulate God to show up on cue, because true blue spiritual experiences are not manufactured by laser beam light shows, throbbing music, or smoke and mirrors. That's showbiz, not worship of the Holy One of Israel. God is free to come and go, just like his own angels descend and ascend. So what we have here is a treasure, a story to prepare us for the moments when God does come. We can't predict them, but we can always prepare for them. We can open our hearts and turn off the alarm systems and pray for eyes to see and hear when God shall come. We ask that we might be ready, that we would never miss it. A few years ago, I found myself in Sedona, Arizona. Anybody ever been there? It's a great place. Striking rock formations right out of a Roadrunner cartoon. In fact, I have it on good advice. They filmed the cartoon in Sedona. The New Age types just love that place. They claim it's full of spiritual energy, that there's a vortex there between heaven and earth. I don't know about that. All I saw was one gift shop after another with esoteric junk, and Native American flute players playing on CDs that cost $87. But then our family made it to the Chapel of the Holy Cross. If you're ever in Sedona, don't miss it. The chapel is built around a huge steel cross that looks like it has been thrust down into a fold in the red rocks. And many years ago, a woman I know went there as a tourist with her husband. They thought they were sightseeing. In truth, their souls were mending, because it was a year or so after they had lost a son who died 3 days after he was born. The tour guide explained to them about the chapel. She told about the wealthy patron who commissioned it with some guidance from Frank Lloyd Wright. It was interesting, and then the woman sat down in the pew and gazed through the window at the extraordinary landscape in the chapel windows. Then it happened. She had a vision of Jesus. He beckoned to her. She smiled. She gasped. She began to weep, and then he was gone. It was the last thing we expected, she said, and it was just what we needed. After all these years, when she tells that story, when my mother tells that story, her eyes still fill with tears, her heart full of deep joy. Surely God is in this place, and I didn't know it. The theologian Belden Lane asks, how do you know a place is a holy place? Did a miracle once happen there? Are there worship services going on? What makes it a sacred place? His answer is simple and profound. The holy place chooses you. The sacred place is not chosen, it chooses. And God chooses to find you there. It could happen just once, never to be repeated. But when God comes, you know it. And when you stand and wipe your eyes, you continue then on your journey as a different person. And this is the best reason I know why you should give 10% of your income to this church. To provide a holy place for others.